welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Barton Simmons. I'm Chip Patterson, checking in on a big game breakdown. Make sure that you subscribe to the Cover 3 podcast. We have for years been available wherever you find your podcasts, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get it, we are there, Cover 3 podcast. But now the multi-platform excellence extends to YouTube, youtube.com/cover3, where you can watch all of these episodes, and on CBS Sports HQ. Tune in on CBS Sports HQ, 4:30 on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Tuesday show sometimes starts at 4, sometimes starts at 4:15. We're on UEFA. Barton, I know that working on UEFA schedule is not exactly going, like, a lot of soccer has invaded our lives in this podcast, but we're doing our best to be able to give the people the multi-platform excellence wherever they can get it.
You've embraced it. You've embraced the soccer life. I still haven't gotten there yet. You guys got to get get a few more soccer lessons from Fernelli before I'm there. But I'm glad to see you've dove into the culture.
Yeah, the key is hashtag wake up to winners. So Tom he has a soccer picks column, and like so many of them are 7 a.m. Saturday or 7 a.m. Sunday games. So you just fire on them blind and you wake up to winners. I mean, there's just no better way to start a weekend. We've got a big show for you. We've got Anna Hickey from 247 Sports checking in. She does a great job on the Clemson beat. We'll be looking at Clemson, Miami. We've got Ben Kercheval, CBS Sports, checking in as we look ahead to Oklahoma, Texas, Red River, Big 12. We mentioned, I felt like I got laughed out of the room a little bit for mentioning Jack Cohn's injury, but he is out indefinitely, Barton. Are you concerned about the status of the Wisconsin quarterback room now?
Who laughed you out of the room? That's big news.
Danny laughed me out of the room
because Danny said Wisconsin doesn't matter as a quarterback, right? Yeah. But no, like, I think I'll reiterate, like, when I said on the Monday show, and I said Jack Fromm Cohn, it was like, it got a chuckle, and I think the insinuation that people thought I was making was that, like, he's like very average. I was actually saying that as a very positive thing. And right. So I think he's pretty critical for Wisconsin. Not that it changed who they are, but no, I think that's important note, and we'll see what Graham Mertz does the rest of the way.
Yeah, we'll see what Graham Mertz does here. We've got a couple of big games to preview, but what else has got your attention as we're heading into this weekend? We've got our lock show tomorrow, and we've got time to be able to dig in. But as you're scanning the slate a little bit, which games or which storylines have been standing out to you?
Well, I mean, the other one so we're talking today, Clemson, Miami, and Oklahoma, Texas. Obviously, two of the big ones on the weekend. Oklahoma, Texas, kind of because of what it's not, as opposed to what it is. Sure. But I think, had we not talked to Rusty last week about Auburn, Georgia, it would be worth having a Auburn or a Tennessee, Georgia discussion this week, because I think it will be a very telling game for both teams, and one that sort of Tennessee has an opportunity to get into the sort of the upper tier of the SEC and even nationally. And then there's the Florida A&M game, which is like, I don't know, like, if Florida continues to convince people, I think, that they're the real deal, and Texas A&M is quickly, losing confidence by the second. So I think that's, and then your boys, North Carolina and Virginia Tech, that's going to be a good one too. So I think, as is the case in this 2020 season, like, every weekend is awesome. So it's going to be another good one.
Do you think that as I look at Tennessee, Georgia, I believe that Tennessee has one of the better offensive lines that Georgia will face this year. And I think that, I don't know if they will be able to run the ball. Like, they will not be able to run the ball as effectively as they did against Missouri. I do not think that is the case. When when you flip it to the other side, after everything we saw from pledge class president Stetson Bennett IV, including him going to the sideline and throwing some red man in the mouth, not regular old dip. We're talking chewing tobacco. We're some red man right in the side of the lip. I mean, he had to have driven home in some kind of like 1978 Jeep with the lift kit, right? Like he's absolutely everything that you would want out of it. But point being, jokes aside, he played really well. So when Georgia or Tennessee are facing a 3rd and long, who do you trust more to come up with the throw? Stetson Bennett IV or Jarrett Guarantano?
I trust Stetson Bennett on, let's say it's 3rd and 12. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I trust Stetson Bennett to throw it 8 yards and then Georgia punts. And I trust Jarrett Guarantano to drop a dime on 1 3rd and 12 and throw a pick 6 on the next 3rd and 12. So what do you want? Do you want the quarterback that's going to throw it behind, before the chains and play field position, or do you want the quarterback that's going to give you the beauty touchdown and maybe throw a touchdown to the other team as well? Like I think that's going to be a really interesting storyline. I think that's going to probably tell us, in a lot of cases, or it might very well tell us the outcome of the game.
I agree.
Can Jarrett Guarantano just add a little bit of Stetson Bennett to his game? Can Stetson Bennett add a little Jarrett Guarantano to his? I don't know. Like I think that's going to be something that is probably dictates the outcome.
No, you don't have to give out any spoilers, but we're talking about this game and we're talking about the margins on which it will be decided. It's still a 12.5-point spread as we're sitting here right now. Does the mere existence of that double-digit spread have you licking your chops a little bit and thinking about whether Jeremy Pruitt's going to be able to, if not have a signature win, at least give Tennessee fans the experience of going through a ride at 3:30, on the streaming it on CBS All Access, SEC on CBS Game of the Week, thinking all the way into the 4th quarter that you might be able to win it?
Sure. I said on Barton and Bud this week that I think, as I sit here right now,
mm-hmm.
that I think Tennessee will beat one of Georgia, Florida, Alabama. Be one of them. Now, yeah. I think that theory could get blown to pieces in this game. Georgia could just come out and just totally outclass Tennessee, and then we're just reminded we're just in year 3. This is just they're not there yet. All they are is the team that's now doesn't have to sweat Missouri. But if it's a 4-quarter game, because they had moments of competitiveness against Georgia last year, got kind of loose. Then they had significant chunk of competitiveness against Alabama before the Guarantano goal line fumble or whatever.
YOLO.
The YOLO. Yeah.
Guarantano calling his own number. I got this one, Coach.
So I think that's part of. I think this might be the most interesting game to me of the weekend, honestly, because of the Tennessee element. I think at this point we're a little bit better, more secure in who Georgia is.
Agree.
But I think Tennessee is a big sort of X factor on the year.
I agree. It's my favorite game of the weekend. I mean, it's everything that I want. I mean, just big, nasty, physical offensive lineman, field position, like an over-under of 42. Oh, God, cannot wait.
Yeah. Josh Pate said, he tweeted this, I think. He said that Tennessee, Georgia is going to be what we thought Auburn, Georgia was going to be, in the sense of like, and then I think he maybe even tweeted that in like the first half when it looked like that was going to go way over the number, and it was like, but I kind of agree. I think this is going to be much more of all right, this is the 20-13, 17-12 kind of finish, and that's the way those old ball coaches like it.
Yeah. On the other side, and you mentioned this one, I feel like if Georgia, Tennessee tells us a lot about Tennessee, Florida, Texas A&M has to be all about A&M, right? You're playing, yep. It's at home. It's Kyle Field. We are not feeling real good about the way things are going right now. And Like there is an opportunity for Kellen Mond to cook a little bit against this Florida defense. And if he doesn't, and it's no bueno, man. I mean, like that line is at 7. That line is at 7 points. I mean, that seems like odds makers got the 24/7 team talent composite out, and they're just using that for all their power ratings because Texas A&M doesn't play up to the level of way their talent looks on paper.
This is sort of the last hurrah here of Texas A&M for the 2020 season. They have
it's October or October 10th on Saturday.
This is the Alamo. This is the A&M Alamo, and I'm not very confident that they come out of this thing alive. So, but that'll be very reassuring. And if they figure out a way to win this game, like that would just be, I think, that'd be encouraging for the SEC West race the rest of the way. All right, they've already gotten smoked by Alabama, but hey, maybe this team is pretty good, and maybe there is a legitimate race for second, or maybe there is. I think it raises the sort of the water level in the SEC West. If obviously it does. If A&M can beat Florida, but I don't expect that to happen.
Coming up on the other side, we take a look at Oklahoma, Texas, and Anna Hickey. 247 Sports checks in, and we look at Clemson, Miami, all that and more next. And now it is our pleasure to welcome back to the show Ben Kercheval, CBS Sports. Ben, we had a lot of fun breaking down during the Hurry Up Hot Seat. I mean, we took our swings at a lot of teams as we were just tearing through, unsure of what the season was going to be, but sure enough, we're off and running right now. And with this Oklahoma, Texas game coming up, it feels like in one sense it has lost some of its luster. Both teams coming in off a loss, but in another sense, you got both teams that are kind of desperate. You got an Oklahoma fan base that's a little bit antsy. You haven't been 0-2 in Big 12 play since John Blake, RIP. But for Texas, you don't want this to start spinning out of control. Like as you're going into this game, I guess if we could start with the Oklahoma part, what do you think is the missing ingredient? What did we miss in our preseason analysis, or what is missing from what you've seen from the Sooners so far?
So what's missing is what I think we always just assume is going to be the case with Oklahoma, that they're just going to reload on offense without skipping a beat. Because to this point, there's been no reason to take the field. There's been no reason to say, I'm not so sure about this. The big thing where it all starts, oddly enough, is the offensive line, which is real strange because they returned 4, if basically not all 5 of their starters in the trenches. And Bill Beatenbaugh, probably going to be a head coach sooner rather than later, one of the best developers of talent in the country at that position. And ever since Lincoln's been a head coach in Norman, they've been first in the Big 12 in rushing. I mean, they run the ball. We think of them as always passing it, but they really have done a great job blocking up front. And I think it starts there for them. They're definitely not their usual selves. Some of that is turnover too. Ramondre Stevenson lost the suspension for the time being. Kennedy Brooks opting out, Trey Sermon transferring. I mean, some of it is just there's just a lot of bodies gone, even though I think Seth McGowan is probably going to be that dude for them, at least until Stevenson gets back. And then it's so weird to say this out loud and write it down. Bud Elliott at 24/7 Sports had the onions to do it earlier this week, and it kind of gave me some bravado to do the same. I don't know that they have an assassin. I don't know that they have a guy at wide receiver who's that CeeDee Lamb type where you go, he's going to get it in the end zone. He's going to be that guy who takes over the game. They don't have the Joe Mixon type. They don't have the Marquise Brown where you're like, you need a play and you need it yesterday. He's going to get it for you. They have talent. That's not the issue. Charleston Rambo is a really talented wide receiver for them. They have a reliable tight end. Clearly, Spencer Rattler has arm talent. They just don't have that extra little, that little something that mitigates, I think, some of the problems that you see on defense that they can normally overcome.
So they've been like 5 of their last 6 games last year in the Big 12 were one-score games, including the Big 12 championship game. 2 years ago, I'm just looking at like it was like 51-46 to Texas Tech, 48-47 Oklahoma State. Kansas played them close. West Virginia, 59-56. Like, is this team? Is this just a year where maybe they're closer? Like, you can look at this 2 ways, I guess. Like, you can look at it to where this is the year where they're just getting caught. The streak is over. This is just not the dominant team. Or is it possible to look at this through the lens of, you know what, they've been this team for the past few years. They've played a little bit of these close games. Like, they've been living on the edge more so than we've been giving them credit for. This year, they just, they don't have one of these Marquise Browns to bail them out. And maybe they'll turn the corner as some of these guys start to develop. McGowan starts to develop. Spencer Rattler starts to get some experience. Is there? Can you buy that they're closer than we want to give them credit for?
No. I mean, let me put it this way. The last thing I want to do is be like, nah, man, Oklahoma sucks this year. Because then, they turn around and they win, however many games. But again, I think the problems that they have are, I guess I went into the Iowa State game thinking, I just, historically speaking, I just don't see them losing 2 games in a row. That doesn't mean that they won't have more losses over the course of the season. But I think after coming out of that game, I'm going, no, they got some stuff to fix. And I think it's an issue of them. Yeah, some of it is they're just not maybe catching all of the breaks or having all of the standout guys to kind of cover up the blemishes for you. But some of it is, they just take a little bit of a step back. It happens. I mean, Alabama took a little bit of a step back last year. Some of it was injury to Tua, but some of it is just you're on top for so long. Eventually, that just comes back a little bit. So I think the gap between them and the pretty good teams in the Big 12 is probably just a little bit closer than it has been. And so I think, we were writing about it this week on Big 12 Burn Ends. There's probably 2 or 3 teams that have a little bit more of a window. That door has cracked open a little bit wider for them because I think there's some blood in the water.
So you said historically speaking, you weren't really thinking they'd lose 2 in a row. And I'm not asking for your game prediction, but are you entertaining the reality that this is 3 in a row with the Texas game coming up?
I'm entertaining it. I'm not picking it. But
But you believe it's a realistic outcome. You're not doing this hard line in the sand. No chance Lincoln Riley is going to let this Oklahoma team lose 3 Big 12 games in a row. No chance.
Well, that's why I'm picking them to win. I mean, that seed's planted, but I was sitting there and I was like, again, John Blake, rest in peace, man. But Lincoln Riley ain't no John Blake. I think when you talk about backs against the wall, and both of these programs are all kind of there, but in the corner, desperate team's a dangerous team, and Lincoln's been a little conservative so far. I think the gloves are off for this one. And if at any time you want those gloves off, it's for this one.
So I feel like I'm hearing you say that Oklahoma needs this more than Texas does. Is that what you think? Am I reading that right? Because I'm not sure I agree with that.
I don't.
This
I don't
like
know.
a desperate situation for both.
I don't know that Oklahoma needs it more than Texas. I think come game time and execution time, I think Oklahoma gets it done. But Texas, here's what's frustrating people in Austin. I can hear them from my apartment. This is where we're at with them. Most teams are taking a little bit of a step back because of the pandemic. Timing's off, muscle memory's off, It's
penalty, bad tackling, like
penalties.
Seen it all over the place.
Seen it all. But for Texas, 22 penalties in the last 2 weeks for 192 yards. Procedural stuff, pre-snap stuff. Every positive play for TCU was a holding penalty. I mean, now some of it is just Big 12 refs going to Big 12 ref. But, like, they are not – they're stumbling. They're not executing on all cylinders. And, I think when you – on the other side of that Red River, when you see Oklahoma being an open vessel like it is right now, people are going like, yo, man, like, this is your chance. Like, if you're going to get them, now's when you're going to get them. And I think after that TCU loss, you go, man, 7 of the last 9 to Gary Patterson. And now we're going to go – if we make it, I think Oklahoma's won 4 of the last 5. If you go, man, if we can't get them now, are we going to be able to get them if we face them again in the Big 12 championship? It's just – this is it's a desperation mode for Texas in another sense in that, look, man, we see the vulnerability here. We got to take advantage of that.
So Tom Herman has, like, what was his quote? He said something along the way of, like, even if we had won that game, you know, we would still have these issues. We would still have a lot of problems with this team. Like, if Ingram had punched that touchdown in, then this, like, we are still going to be very concerned. And if we don't fix those issues, it doesn't even matter the opponent, something along those lines. So Tom Herman seems to be calling it like it is right now. Where are you at with Tom Herman? Because here's the situation.
Hang on, what's the Tom Herman dance? The Alamo Bowl dance?
Like, he's bringing in new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and there's a way to read it as though that was your Hail Mary, right? But then you don't have the full off season to install everything. Like, where you at with Tom Herman right now?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. When you bring in 2 new coordinators, that tells you, like, yo, man, we need a wholesale fix. Because you can recruit, but, you know, you need those guys coaching them up. And when you do wholesale fixes, that typically is like your sort of that's your safeties, right? I mean, that's your last line of defense. And I think with Tom Herman, the thing that is habitually frustrating is that they can't get over that ceiling, that like 8.5, right? Like 9 win ceiling. They might get it one year. And I think by winning 10 games or whatever it was, getting the Big 12 championship in 2018, that was like year 2. I think they punched up. I mean, I think they got a little bit ahead of schedule, took a step back last year, which was kind of natural given the roster turnover. But this is a year where you're like, okay, we got to get back up there. And they just haven't quite been able to it's like right there and they just can't get over it. And I think the ever growing frustration is, okay, with Mac Brown, it kind of went in the tank. With Charlie Strong, it never worked out. With it, like, how many more times do we have to do this before we're going to – just the playoff, baby. Like, just get us, like, over one of those humps. And they just haven't been able to do it. And it's always something different. And with this year, it's the penalties. It's the discipline. It's like Sam Ellinger threw 4 touchdowns against TCU, and you'd swear it was 4 interceptions. Like, it's always something.
Is Tom Herman on the hot seat?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Like legit, like you could see legitimately. I'm not like the pressure is obviously on.
Yeah.
But could it go so south that there's a move made this year? Do you think?
You know, if you'd asked me that maybe 3 months ago, Barton, I probably would have said, nah, this is the clean slate year. Everyone kind of gets the freebie. But like, who got fired after 1 week?
Southern Miss.
Yeah, that's right. Hobson, well, he parted ways.
Whatever it means. He was gone.
However you want to part it.
I think the team fired him. They made a decision with their performance.
I'm kind of tight with Scotty Walden. I was texting him and I was like, hey man, how are things? He was like, yo man, it was not good. And so, I don't think Tom Herman is in that same, like, Hobson realm where you're like, the team's just not even buying in anymore. But he definitely is on the production side of it. He's not quite getting it done. Obviously, there's still time. But in terms of, do I think a move would be made? I no longer buy the fact that this is a free year for everybody.
Yeah, Sam Ellinger, 14 touchdowns to 2 interceptions on the season, and he's out here sad boy status talking about this being the darkest day for a proud program, given that old Manny Diaz speech. So what's your as you're doing the X's and as you're writing previews for CBSSports.com, where's like the one spot that you've got as really seeing this matchup hinging?
Again, it comes down to who from Oklahoma is going to step up and be that dude. And maybe even Lincoln Riley has to do it with like a Philly special or something. Like someone's got to come out and say, we're not losing this game. And I think Oklahoma just finds that one more play to get it up. Because on paper, like Texas got everything they need to tear apart Oklahoma's passing defense. Like you got like what's his face from Kansas State, Deuce Vaughn, like running a little slant route, like out of the slot, going 7-8 yards for a touchdown against Oklahoma. So I think Texas, when you talk about like Brennan Eagles, Joshua Moore, like they got those big body types at all positions to go out there and make plays against this Oklahoma defense. I think that's going to be a total success for them. I think this game easily gets into the 30s, if not the 40s. Last team with the ball wins type of thing. I just think Oklahoma finds that one more play and gets it done.
All right, what about the rest of the Big 12? If there's blood in the water, who you got your money on in being able to feast?
I've been riding on TCU's wagon for a real long time. Max Duggan does not have the biggest resume right now. You're talking about 1.5 games. I think he's been the most consistently impressive quarterback in the Big 12 so far. But we got to just see a little bit more from that team in general. I think if Iowa State can just get everyone to play their type of ball, then, yeah, I think Iowa State can be that team too. Love that defensive front from the Cyclones. Love Mike Rose. I think he's an everywhere linebacker for them. Their big thing is they're going to play Texas Tech this weekend. The one thing I don't love about Iowa State is if they get behind like 14-0, I think that's a little bit more of a challenge for them. I don't know that they have the targets in the passing game beyond Charlie Kohler to really like open up and say like, okay, we're down 2-3 scores. We can get this back, no problem, make some halftime adjustments. They get behind, I think that's their Achilles heel. But those are my two teams. I'm not super buying Oklahoma State yet.
Oh, come on.
I know that's your boy. I know those your boys. Those your boys, Barton. Defense is salty as hell. Like, I love what they're producing on defense. I've seen this movie, and I feel like Mike Gundy's got a couple of clunkers in him. I feel like he's got a couple of Mike Gundy specials in him. And that's just me. Shane Illingworth has been good. And I think that's a potential quandary if he continues to play well. Do you just ride him?
No.
You think what do you mean?
Sanders is going to come back. Like he's Spencer Sanders. That's the key. That's the key point with Oklahoma State is we haven't even seen Oklahoma State with Spencer Sanders.
Let me ask.
Because Shane Illingworth is surviving out there and Oklahoma State is surviving with them doesn't mean that suddenly there's a quarterback controversy. This team is going to get better when Spencer Sanders.
Let me ask you a question. In the trio of Chuba Hubbard, Tylan Wallace, and Spencer Sanders, how you ranking that trio in terms of how good they are and how important they are in that team?
Tylan Wallace. No, how important they are to that team, I probably would still put Spencer Sanders 1. Spencer Sanders
what?
1, Tylan Wallace 2, and Chuba Hubbard
So
3.
when Shane Illingworth took a couple of bombs to Tylan Wallace to finally get things going against Tulsa because everything was dead in the water, you think Spencer Sanders, a healthy Spencer Sanders, is making those throws?
Yeah, why not? What are we talking? Shane Illingworth stands there with Frankenstein boots on and throws it north. And Spencer Sanders has the arm talent, has the ability to make those throws. He can just give you a run element too. The Spencer Sanders thing is not necessarily the Spencer Sanders is like this is phenomenal quarterback. It's that as Spencer Sanders goes, so goes the ceiling of Oklahoma State. So yes, if Spencer Sanders is not very good, then Oklahoma State will not be very good also. But I think that Spencer Sanders gives them the chance to be good. Chuba Hubbard, they also have LD Brown, so like he's actually not that.
That's fair.
And Tylan Wallace, I think, is critical because he is their one like absolute dude on the perimeter. But yes, I think if you're hating on Oklahoma State, that's fine. Wait till my boy gets back in, and we'll have Coca clip this, and we can run it back when Oklahoma State's playing in the college football playoffs.
Okay, I'll give you that time. I think Shane Illingworth, passing wise, can make the same plays that Spencer Sanders can. Now, can Spencer Sanders give you the run game? Absolutely. But if you have LD Brown taking some pressure off of Chuba Hubbard, I think you've sort of helped with that a little bit in the aggregate. So I think Oklahoma State, I think they have their clunkers left in them this year, so I'm not totally buying it. But I love that defense. Defense has been way ahead of the offense, way ahead of schedule there.
He is Ben Kercheval. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Kercheval, and he will be back to gloat or take it like Oklahoma State.
Don't come on my podcast and come at my pokes.
We've got the rivalry set for the rest of the Big 12 season. Be sure to read his preview of Texas, Oklahoma, and of course follow along all throughout. Are you doing live blog on Saturday?
Do we have a live blog set up? I don't know.
Oh, did it miss the cut? That stinks.
That's not good. That's not good.
Says something about the game. All right, Ben. Thank you very much.
All right, peace, guys.
And now it is our pleasure to welcome to the podcast, oft referenced, and always a bit of research as we are digging around on the Clemson Tigers. Nobody has their finger on the pulse of that program quite like Anna Hickey, 247 Sports. Anna, the Clemson beat has become this very, very interesting, it is insular and at the same time attracts a lot of national attention. And it feels like, there's always that national, local, like push and pull. But I feel like you've done a good job of threading the line there. You represent 247 Sports. You're able to also still keep all your sources right there on the ground. How is the experience of being there and, making that trip to the facility, sliding down the slide and sort of seeing the way that the beat has exploded over the last couple years?
Well, the slide, I can say, lives up to standards. We got to do it once, the media did, because Dabo's press conference is upstairs, and then we'll go downstairs to do player and coordinator availability. So sometimes they'll let us take the slide. There is a sign there that says players and staff only, though, but sometimes when they're not looking, we will slide down the slide. But the facility is awesome. I mean, it's kind of been weird these past few months. We haven't been able to do anything in person. Everything's been via Zoom, but Clemson's been pretty good in terms of access. I mean, we're still getting coordinators during the week, which is one of my favorite things about it. I know a lot of schools around the country don't do that. And just the insight that Venables and Elliott can give us post-game and then during the week. I mean, I think my coverage of games and the analysis, that sort of thing is extremely better because of that, just what they're able to give you there. This has kind of been a turbulent offseason, though, for Dabo Swinney and Clemson. I mean, back in the summer, the racial injustice stuff was really kind of at its peak. Dabo was right in the middle of that. And then it kind of got going again last week when he was asked a question, a pretty sensitive question about Black Lives Matter. And that kind of went off the rails a little bit. There was some tension there between the media and Dabo. But this week, I think with a big opponent in Death Valley, we'll be kind of strictly talking about football.
All right, so let's talk football. Let's talk Clemson, because I think a lot of people are probably like me, who are sort of watching Clemson just on like the side TV, because they're blowing everybody out. And
I was listening to Cover 3, and Barton had zero to say about Clemson, Virginia, and I was really looking forward to that because Clemson didn't play that
well. So this is my question for you: is like, tell us, how is this the same level of Clemson as the last few? Like, because there is a lot of, like, there's a lot of these young freshmen that are playing. They're missing some of these perimeter receivers that have been so critical the last few years. They're still blowing teams out. Like, I actually looked at when I kind of box score scouted the Clemson Virginia game, because I only watched it in just sort of flashes here and there. I sort of looked up and I was like, you know what? Clemson kind of scored just about every possession except for like maybe 3. I don't know what it was, like, 8 of 12 possessions or something. And so there's still clearly still just like, on this death march through the ACC, but I don't know that I have a firm grasp on whether this is the same. It's clearly still elite. It's clearly one of the top 3 or 4, but do you have a sense on whether or not this is like just like always, or whether there's a crack in the facade, or whether, hey, maybe they're even better than we realize?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I was thinking about this yesterday. Normally when as a Clemson reporter, I've obviously covered some big games, but it's normally in the postseason when we know what Clemson is and we know what their opponent is in the playoff. This year it's kind of different, covering a top 10 matchup, and I really don't know what Clemson is at this point. And Clemson, I mean, they've kind of been known to have that slow start. They're going to play a bunch of guys, develop their team, not show a lot maybe kind of early in the year, and then kind of come on. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that per se against Miami, but kind of a couple of things that you talked about. Still some question marks in my eyes at wide receiver around the perimeter. Worth noting that Joseph Ngata, their primary boundary guy, has been out the past 2 games with an ab injury. I think he's expected back versus Miami, so that'll definitely give them kind of a boost there. But you're right, they don't have Ross. Latson has done some good things, but I still think they're waiting for him to be super consistent, especially with the deep ball. Amari Rogers has looked really good now that he's healthy off that ACL injury, and he gives him a vertical threat, which is something that I didn't necessarily expect coming into the season. I thought he'd be mostly an underneath guy. And then Galloway, the tight end, has stepped up in certain occasions that Virginia kind of shut him down. So I think that'll be an interesting matchup to see if on Saturday versus Miami, to see kind of if those receivers can get going. But yeah, just big picture. I mean, this defense is different. And I know every year Clemson loses some key pieces, whether the NFL or graduation, but we kind of just expect Clemson's defense to be Clemson's defense because of Brent Venables and the way they develop the guys in their program. But I think they have 3 starters back. So there's a lot of young guys. And then up front, they're missing Xavier Thomas, Justin Foster, and Tyler Davis. So that's 3 starters. And their defensive front still has performed well. But, I think that's something to note.
What's going on with Tyler Davis?
He got banged up in the second game, Raby? Am I right about that? First game?
No, he did not play versus Citadel. He got banged up in the Wake Forest game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then Foster's kind of in protocol, undisclosed stuff there. I don't think he'll be back this week. And then Thomas, they're trying to work him in maybe later this month. So, yeah, that's our 3 starters right there along the defensive front. But I think the main thing has been the secondary. 2 corners. Their corners have been pretty locked down. Darren Kendrick on one side and kind of a mix of Booth and Mario Goodrich on the other side. But safety, losing Tanner Muse and Kayvon Wallace, they're just such playmakers in the middle, super savvy in stopping the run, just kind of patrol that middle of the field back area. And they have Nolan Turner there, and then Landon Sanders, who's a first-year starter. And I think that's another key matchup on Saturday, just how those guys perform defending Brevin Jordan and Will Mallory.
So to your point, I looked at there have been 11 regular season games against ranked teams since the start of 2015, since the championship run starts. Average points allowed in those games, 18.5. And a lot of 24-10, 27-7, 14-6. If possible, my theory is big game dabbing. Big Game Dabo wants to let Brent go and win the game. He wants to let the defense go and win the game. He'll take the field goal. If the red zone try doesn't work out, he will punt to play field position and run the ball to avoid making that kind of game-changing mistake. And I like what you said, because it's every year the defense sort of shifts an identity, right? Like, I mean, at least in terms of what they do well and sort of schematically what they're trying to do. Does this defense, especially with some of those some of the attrition that you just mentioned right there, does Clemson have a defense to be able to play that big game Dabo style and limit Miami's up-tempo offense to let that group lead?
Yeah, I think the tempo is key, because Miami likes to use tempo to kind of catch you sleeping, alignments, eyes, that sort of thing. Clemson was not good in that department against Virginia, especially in the pass plays. I mean, they let, I think it was 4 pass plays of 20-plus yards. And then they let Armstrong scramble and kind of get outside the pocket. So it was interesting what Clemson did defensively against Virginia, though. They didn't really bring pressure. They kind of dropped into rushing lanes, I guess more to just kind of contain Armstrong with his legs. But I don't know. If I was betting, I would not think that would be the same game plan against King. I think Venables is going to dial some more stuff up and bring more pressure to kind of see what they can do in the backfield there. But, I don't know. I think Venables, his scheme, he's so smart. I think he knows what kind of personnel he has, their strengths and their weaknesses. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't kind of have an A+ game plan this week. He talked about it this week, just how much he's kind of relishing this opportunity to go against King and some of these playmakers. So, when you look across the board, I mean, other than up front, you're not going to, and maybe at corner, you're not going to have any of these 4 5-star guys jump off the page at you at linebacker and safety. So it's kind of been like that for Clemson. So in that sense, you kind of think that, this defense is going to be like defenses in years past, even though they're inexperienced just because of Venables. But I still think we're waiting for that test to see if that's going to hold true.
Yeah, but I feel like that's all, like, the last couple of years, I remember, like, the knock on Clemson, like, from other coaches was, well, I don't know, like, their safeties aren't that good. And then you look up and, Kayvon Wallace gets drafted in the 4th round, and, like, I just feel like they're always like more talented than we give them credit for. I'm curious on, like, Brandon Marcello just wrote a piece for 24/7 Sports, like, why Miami thinks they can beat Clemson or whatever. And Miami's got, they're 3-0, and I've got them ranked 3rd in the country on my CBS poll. Yeah. Why are you laughing at that? I got to rank 3rd in the country on my CBS poll. I'm building up the hype here, and Miami gets all juiced up for these kind of games. And
you've got BYU 4, right?
They're like 9th. Yeah, they're up there. So my question is, does Clemson think that they are invincible, or does Clemson think that they can? And I know that that's obviously a very abstract question, but the vibe you get from this program this year, this cycle, do you think that there's an element of invincibility to their mentality, or not? Because there are some of these kind of new faces defensively, new faces on offense.
I think that they are not going to, if they do think there's some cracks, they're not going to show it, whether that's a coordinator or especially Dabo Swinney. I mean, you hear Dabo talk about his team, and they're not going to lose to anybody. But I do think that they recognize, especially the players, they recognize the youth on defense and how that might take a few games to kind of start clicking, especially, like you said, at safety. And then up front if those guys are missing. But anytime you have Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and an offensive line that's pretty good, I think you're going to have a chance, regardless of kind of where your other pieces might be lacking. So, I don't know. If you were asking me that question, do I think there's some invincibility there? I think that they just have so much experience in these big games, so much success in the postseason, that they have a blueprint, and they feel like if they stick to that blueprint, even, think about the North Carolina game last year, that was when it was like, oh no, is Clemson going to have that season where they maybe don't get to the playoff this year? And then they did. So I just think that they take their time developing their team in the beginning of the season, and they feel like if they trust their plan, then by the end of the year, they'll be where they want to be.
If they want to, they can't lose though. Because that was the other thing is, right. I was going back doing that research. The one time where Clemson's hand was forced was against Lamar Jackson. Like, Lamar Jackson was a game changer, and he came into Death Valley October 1st, 2016, and all of a sudden, a couple quick scores, and, like, all right, we got to get out of our game plan. We got to find ways to start getting some points real quick. And, like, do you think that Derek King can be Lamar Jackson in this scenario? Not necessarily that, Miami's going to win because of him, but is he that kind of game changer in your eyes where he might force Clemson to go a little bit deeper in the playbook, or not go as deep in the depth chart, just to make sure that they keep the talent level high to be able to keep pace?
Yeah, I think he's that type of dynamic player. He's not as fast as Lamar, right? So
Right.
I don't know if – and Lamar kind of got Clemson on the edges a few times, strictly with his speed. So I don't know if that's going to necessarily hurt Clemson as much. But I do think in terms of just talking about a dynamic quarterback, he likes to throw. He's very accurate. He's very consistent. He's got a plethora of pass catchers, even though – to me, one of the things to look at is just kind of how their wide receivers haven't necessarily had those breakout games yet. I mean, obviously they have Brevin Jordan and Will Mallory, but wide receiver-wise, I think, you could still stand to see more from Mark Pope. But, yeah, I mean, if he's not passing, then he's scrambling. I think he's averaging 15 yards a scramble. And then Dabo said yesterday he's averaging 5.4 yards after contact. So, I mean, he's physical. He's got everything you want in a quarterback. And and I think they have enough pieces in the run game with Harris and just explosive playmakers all around. And their scheme is so good, I feel like, with the tempo Lashley's doing, and it actually looks organized for once, with Miami. So, I mean, I think that their offense, King definitely gives them a chance.
What's your pick, Anna? This is your chance.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Clemson. I feel pretty confident in that. Now, whether I'm going to go, what is the line now? 14? Mm-hmm. Somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. I haven't determined that. But, yeah, I think this might be a trendy upset pick this week. I don't know. But I think Clemson has just been there before. They have the big game experience. I don't know if they necessarily showed their cards defensively versus Virginia. And I just kind of trust Brent Venables dialing something up for this Miami offense. And then I trust what Trevor Lawrence can do. And then I think Miami's run defense is a liability. So I think one of the keys is just kind of to try to get Travis Etienne going early. Could be a high-scoring affair, but I just think Clemson comes out on top.
So you obviously – you cover the juggernaut in the league, and so as you look across the rest of the league and you look at if this isn't the game that Clemson gets beat, is there another team out there you have your eye on that could potentially challenge Clemson down the road, whether it's a matchup or whether it's just a team that you think is that good? Where does your attention go towards?
Well, Notre Dame, I think, is the obvious answer there, especially with the game being in South Bend. Notre Dame having played Clemson before, kind of understanding what they bring to the table and that revenge factor a little bit. But to me, it's not necessarily that one game that you circle. I mean, you could look at Pitt, maybe has some pieces. Virginia Tech, I think, has some pieces. But to me, it's just like that, they have that stretch, that 6-game stretch that's going to be pretty tough. And could they slip up there, especially in a weird era of COVID where you might have a key player missing here or there? Yeah. Kind of like when they lost to Syracuse. You weren't necessarily picking them to lose to Syracuse, but they had that one bad game last year where they could have lost to North Carolina. You wouldn't have seen that coming, but it happened. So I don't know if Clemson kind of got that out of their system against Virginia. Because, I mean, offensively, they got behind the chains, but overall they did well. Defensively, they didn't look good, though. So I don't know if that was their early season blunder, if we're kind of still you might still have that. I picked preseason, though, Clemson to lose one regular season game this season. And that was more so because of just the uncertainty of COVID, not necessarily because I could pinpoint one team that I thought they'd lose to.
Right.
But, I mean, I'm not saying that they couldn't lose this weekend. I definitely think they could, but I just think that you have to know something that I don't know if you're going to pick Miami straight up.
And I assume nothing has changed in terms of your preseason pick that you think they'll slip up somewhere along the way, or that you're predicting that they'll slip
I
up
think
somewhere
they definitely could. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I don't know if I can look on the schedule right now and say, hey, this would be their slip-up game. I just think it could happen somewhere along the way.
I mean, they've won 38 out of 40 going into the year. So I guess now it's what, like 40 out of 42? Stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, they win ACC games, and they win most regular season games, especially when they haven't lost a regular season game with Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback.
Well, Chip, you're on the over from the Edgewater Sportsbook and Emporium and Buffet, and so you might not see that slip up. I'm on the under along with Anna, and so I guess we'll find out if the COVID era is gonna catch them.
What is your pick in this game? Either one of you go. Are you allowed to say that, or do you have to say that later in the week?
I haven't crunched the numbers yet, so I don't have an official pick. I mean, I think Clemson wins. But whether it's a cover, whether it's I'm still figuring out how close I think it's going to be.
I'm on the under, and I'm on Clemson, and I think it is like it ain't going to be 38-3, but it might be one of those games where it's like, I don't know, 31-10, and all of a sudden it's just because kind of hard to run an up-tempo offense in a hurricane, even if your name is the Hurricanes. And like when there's like standing water on the ground and you're out there and you're just like splash, 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 splash as you're just trying to get going. I could see this being a game that Clemson is more than happy to turn into a rock fight because they just think that running the ball, they're going to be able to be better than Miami doing that. I mean, Miami's running up against Louisville and Florida State. Like UAB is the best defense that they faced. And I'm definitely buying in. I will say the two areas that do concern me are Brevin Jordan, who is an NFL everything, first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. And Clemson does have some standard issue, regular old Clemson linebackers. Like James Skalski, that's a Clemson try-hard at linebacker if I've ever seen one. Like Mike Jones, Balin Spector. Like Clemson's always got a couple of those linebackers that are just like, oh, we're good development guys. And they do come up with like big plays, but I mean, that just might be a size and talent mismatch if they get the wrong kind of matchups there. The other one, and I know Dabo mentioned this, I think yesterday, but Quincy, Roche, and Jalen Phillips are dangerous. And I don't know, like you said, Clemson's offensive line is what? They're all right. They're pretty good, but I don't think that there's many teams that will test them like Miami up front.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's probably the key matchup. Jackson Carman, Jordan McFadden defending number 2 and 15 for Miami. I do think we'll see some explosive plays this week. I mean, Miami kind of makes a living off that, especially with their tempo, whether it's in the run game or pass game, and I think Clemson does too. So I would be on the over, and I lean towards Clemson covering too. But they're not official.
You said eye discipline, right? Clemson's eye discipline didn't look good, right?
There might be a buzzword that I picked up hearing Venables say it every single time we talk to him, but yeah, that's definitely important for tempo.
She is Anna Hickey. You can follow her on Twitter at AnnaH247. Follow all the action, 247 Sports. Clemson, no one does it better on the Clemson beat, so make sure that you keep tabs. It's been too long. Again, we often shout you out on the podcast for giving us those good nuggets. And
I'm a devoted listener, so I hear it. Yeah.
Yes, I'm glad you got to make an appearance. Anna, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for having me.